Next up is discussion regarding our residential master plan, and talking about our presentation on September 19th. So we just received the update to the master plan, including Judy Barrett's revised fiscal analysis and the revisions to their recommendations for potential bylaw tweaks and modifications. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to review all of that, but Patrick, do you want to just kind of take us through that real quick? And
I have not had a chance to look through all of it. However, as we had earlier commented, we were really feeling like the master plan document itself needed to have a lot more in terms of recommendations, a lot more in terms of practical approaches as to what we as a town should be doing in terms of our limited growth ability that people here are willing to accept relative to zoning bylaws, those kinds of things. So I have noticed that there's several things here that have been added that look at ways to encourage the community to have more moderate levels of growth. You can read some of that in goals and recommendations. They're very big into an approach called by right cluster development zoning, which I'm not sure if there's going to be much stomach for that in town. I'd like to definitely have some discussion on that. I think there were some overestimations in terms of what they think the Affordable Housing Trust can do. There's certainly an important element in local government, but I don't think they're the level of ability, resources, et cetera, that would be in a larger community. So I really think that that needs to be put into perspective as to what their limited resources typically are. Another element of that too is the fact that we are pretty strapped now for cash. And furthermore, the town is going to be likely spending a significant amount of its CPA resources for the next several years on this building, as well as on the Patton Homestead property. So the idea of having the ability to utilize extensive funds for Hamilton Affordable Housing Trust sponsored projects, I just don't see that as a major reality or opportunity. One of the discussion items was in terms of opportunity development areas was focusing on town property. We've climbed that tree on many occasions. I think a seed has been planted about utilizing the Winthrop School property for housing development purposes, and maybe decades from now that might be a reality, I think. However, right now, when you look at the practical kinds of events that would have to take place to get to that point, including, first of all, the school board between this community and Wenham would have to agree to, a very different growth plan than what they're now pursuing. You know, would they be vacating that property, rebuilding at Cutler, or go into the general property where the high school is? We don't know that. Those kinds of decisions would be, in my estimation, years off. Even if that property were available, you know, going through a surplusing process that's required by 30B Mass General Law would take years to get to the point where it's developable, sellable, transactable.
Financeable.
And you look also at other elements of the puzzle, you know, like access to that property right across from Asbury. You know, I'd have to believe that given the volume of traffic that you would see on both sides of Bay Road there, you're probably going to be requiring signalized access with turning lanes in each directions, which that is at a minimum a $500,000 project. I did one in Natick 5 years ago before I came here. It was more than that. And, you know, that was where the community owned much of the land area. So, you know, adding $500,000 into a project cost of something where we don't have resources to begin with, I don't feel confident that, you know, that property has the level of opportunity that some think it does. So, but at any event, you know, I do think there's some definitely worthwhile kinds of things in the document that as you read it and get more comfortable with it, I look forward to your comments. You know, back to the Housing Trust, you know, as I'd mentioned, they do have limited resources. I can tell you that in the previous project where they had worked with the Habitat for Humanity project on 270 Asbury, as well as on Lincoln Street there were 2 units that were created, and the town provided about $350,000 for the creation of 2 units. So, you know, that's probably steeper than they have the ability ever again to pursue, as I understand it. But, you know, again, hey, maybe great things will happen. Maybe our CPA funds will be more than what, you know, we anticipate. But I think that we have to be practical in terms of what you know, we think that we can achieve. Okay, I've rambled enough.
It was a good ramble. So, you're expecting or asking for comments from the board to forward to them to produce a final report?
Yes, sir.
Do you want to set a date for that to have?
I think that's a very wise exercise.
The 19th is now really a month away, and
Yep.
Yeah. And I think for us to have a document back, we need to have that back within 10 days of that, you know, for comfort factor. So,
I mean, I was gonna say end of August, but if not before,
Yeah, September 1 at the
10 days
latest.
from now,
for what?
our comments.
Okay, so that's really 2 weeks.
20th,
Oh,
10
that is
days.
the end of August, so, no, about a week.
I think we ought to say like within a week.
Yeah.
okay, great. So August 27th, everyone have their comments to me on the master plan document What about Judy's document as well? You want that too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that, does the link go to both of
The
those?
most recent
It's all
version of
there.
the master plan.
Yes.
He emailed the link to download it.
Yeah, I think so. Let me just check.
So,
27th, you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Week
That's one-
week
one
from
week.
today, 1 week.
Yep.
Jeez.
Okay.
so can we talk about
Yes.
the publicity?
Let's see. I have made a request to have a couple of articles with the new Hamilton Wenham Chronicle writer. He has said, okay, let's do that. I haven't, he hasn't set a date or suggested one, but as soon as I know that, I'll let you folks know. We do have this on the town's Facebook account, some of their other electronic media outlets as well. It is on the town's website. The senior center has a stack of our flyers. We have these flyers posted around this building for people who come and go.
It'll be on the
with-
sign out in front of the police station at some point.
Yeah, let's do that. It's on the Jay Burnham thing as well. I have written an email to all boards, basically asking their chairman, asking their members to participate as we have in the earlier forums. So I'll have that out this week as well. And I'll try to do that at least 2 or 3 times between now and the actual presentation on the 19th.
You had mentioned the idea of sending a letter as well.
Yes, a letter to each of the town chairpersons, whatever they are, and then, following up with emails as well, but having the hard letter for each of them.
And that includes the finance committee?
Yes, absolutely.
So where are you at with your
So,
presentation?
I've drafted a outline, and I gave it to Walsh, and she turned it around very quickly and put together a fantastically professional-looking presentation. It was like, blew me out of my
That's great.
chair. She's on vacation this week. It needs some additional work because some of the information she what's the word I want, pictorially or represented wasn't accurate. So when she gets back, she'll correct it. So I can either send that to everybody or certainly at the next meeting do a presentation. We can turn the air conditioning back on if you want.
Too far.
Okay.
That feels good.
So my question is we got to figure out how to interface that presentation with the consultant's presentation. So probably when we finish and have a final draft of what I prepared and present it to the board for their review and comment then we need to sit down with them and say, okay, how do we fit this together? Because some of the text that I use, sort of bullet points in the presentation, which people will see, actually was extracted out of their report. So we don't want to duplicate what we're saying and what they're saying.
You're thinking yours is gonna be before theirs,
Yeah, this
essentially,
is
right? It's
the
kind of an
big
overview.
picture.
This is to set the
Big picture,
stage, is,
Yeah.
you know, why are we here? You know, what is your role as the audience? What is our role? What do we hope to accomplish tonight? Here's the town currently in terms of its land mass and usage. Here's how housing fits into it. And here are some of the broad issues in town. And then have them fill in, okay, you know, here's the surveys we've done, here's the results of those surveys, this is what people were saying, this is the demographics of our town, and here are our recommendations for addressing the issues that we've identified both through our surveys and public discussions and statistical analysis. This is what our recommendations are. And then, you know, at the end, I have what our next steps are. So we just need to make sure whatever they're doing fits in.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, at what point do you think I should send this document of ours to them so they can start thinking in terms of how to feather it?
Once we've finished it, so hopefully next week.
So, okay.
Or is gone until Monday of next week. So she turned it around like this, so I assume the minor corrections she can take care of in a day or less. Then I'll send it around, but we could send it to them, just say, hey, this is what, the template of what we're thinking about. It's not the final, because the board needs to comment on it. But we want to integrate those two.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, and I'm happy to, you know, however that happens, if I have to go into Boston and sit down with them and go through slide by slide, because this is really this is the production.
Yeah,
This is it.
This is
The
it. yeah.
show.
Yeah.
So I really want it to go well, and I don't want to, like, you know, we're here and they're there,
Yeah.
and
It has to be a whole, it has to hang together.
this is Broadway opening night, so.
But how will the other boards catch up with you? Because you're gonna have thought this through, but they're gonna try and read and absorb many documents and
Well,
have a public discussion of it. I don't have any expectation. Maybe by Thanksgiving it might be absorbed by all the other boards in the town.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, this is not like the end. It's sort of, and that's why we'll have it sort of at the end is what are the next steps? We've presented to you a pretty comprehensive picture, a lot of information to absorb. We don't expect people to like suddenly, you know, achieve nirvana and, you know, we all go forth in a uniform path and all as well. It's gonna then require detailed and long-term public discussion about implementing some or, you know, some of these recommendations and what form those take, if any. So, I mean, it's gonna take a number of years.
Yeah, but I think this is important to be able to start that process, right?
Right.
We have to have we have to present what we found, what the consultants found, how we got to these recommendations, you know, what the town looks like. All this stuff is important for them to hear, that this has been a thoughtful and complete process. Now we're gonna set forth.
I don't think it's gonna change the overall sort of dynamics. It'll just lay a foundation and say, hey, here's the snapshot of where we are. You know, there will obviously will be certain groups of people that want to see, you know, significant changes, and there'll be groups that say everything's fine, we should do nothing. So I assume those people will still be of the same mind, but at least we can say, well, okay, if we do nothing, are you prepared for the financial consequences? You know, so we're talking about, it's not just, I don't like change, I don't want to see any change, leave it the way it is. That's fine, and that's a conscious decision we could make, but there are consequences. So before we adopt that as a strategy, let's understand there are consequences that are going to impact the town, its services, and tax structure, so.
That's what's helpful about what you're putting together is, I think if you consistently use that same presentation
Yeah.
as setting the stage for every change that comes to town meeting or any kind of bylaw change,
Right,
that then there becomes a consistency in messaging that and setting the context for it.
yeah.
Well, I think one of the more important things that has kind of come out of this is how, I don't think people realize how little land we
Right,
have that
right.
can actually be developed.
Right.
So.
Well, that's,
And I agree.
yeah, and I mean, I went back and, you know, through MAPC and the state GIS map and estimates from Jim Henkin on preserved land, it's somewhere around 80 to 85%. It's not clear because nobody has, you know, there are pieces of this information, but nobody's taken it all together in one piece and then sifted through. So there's not a clear delineation. And then the piece is, that's land that is either preserved permanently or restricted currently, but then there's not the piece of, well, what's already developed in terms of houses? You know, how many, which is, we could probably get that from the assessor's office, but I haven't done that. So, but it's a rough estimate, so if it would be higher if you took all the land that already has housing on it or some commercial development. So it probably is 90%, you know, if you take the existing housing that you can't build on, because it already has a home on it. But anyway, so I think that's important to understand. And tomorrow, we have an HDC meeting at 7:30 where we're going to be presenting probably the final draft that we will be bringing to the planning board in September for a site plan review. And I've invited our liaison with the finance committee, Nick Tenson.
Yeah.
Because, and I'm going to talk to him about coming to the September 19th meeting as well. And I really want the finance committee to be involved in this discussion. So I know they want us kind of like state, they can't volunteer to be on committees and they like to be, you know, objective and not get into the sort of weeds of policy, but they need to be informed and aware what this means, and hopefully they can opine and help inform the discussion.
So Rick, when do you want to send around Laura's blueprint to us?
As I said, when she returns on Monday, she's got some minor modifications to make to the technical information that she put into a pictorial form that wasn't entirely accurate. So I want to make sure that when I send it to you, it's accurate. So I'm guessing Monday or Tuesday of next week.
Okay.
So I'll send it to Patrick. Patrick, you can send it out.
Will do.
So then as soon as we provide any feedback, then it should go right away to
Yeah.
consultants?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Do they know, the consultants know that we're doing this?
No.
You know, I was hoping that they didn't rely too much on our work and our product. And for that reason, I want them to have, you know, a product that's robust and that, you know, has its introduction through the completion as well, and doesn't necessarily rely on our piece. And that's why I'm happy that you wanted to have our piece completed before we sent to them, so
Oh, yeah.
they can then, you know, begin to integrate the
Right,
two.
basically, and say, this is the board's template, you're gonna figure out how to fit this together.
I mean, it basically sounds like you're just providing the high level,
Yeah.
overarching stuff. They're gonna provide all the substance.
None
that
of
goes
this
with
is
it.
like
Right, it's all, right, it's all, right.
None
exactly.
of this is like
Yeah, no, it's not.
earth-shattering new information. It's just
Proposed master
basically trying to orient people,
Yeah.
why they're
It's in
there,
a
what we hope
link.
to accomplish. Here are some overview of the current town, just to set the stage, rather than just sort of showing,
Right.
okay, here's what we did,
Right.
and sort of
Right.
throw it down on the table, and people are like, yeah, this is a lot of information, and how is this gonna work, and what's my,
Goes back to the original
Sixteen,
purpose, which was
2019.
to educate
When? 16?
everybody, to be on the same level of having the same understanding before you talk about changes.
Should be- There it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's the-
You good on that?
I think so.
We're gonna get into potential future bylaw amendments. You got a few in here.
Yeah, I did send some to members. You may recall that I asked Town Council Robin Stein, who we met tonight, I asked her for a state-of-the-art groundwater protection overlay district text from another community that she felt was appropriate. Well, interestingly enough, she sent us the text from Falmouth. And if you read through theirs, as I know each of you read through it scrupulously, you will find
In
that
principle, it looks
it
a lot like
bears
ours.
a striking resemblance to ours.
Well, and we know why that is.
Including the definition of lot,
Yeah.
which they are more explicit about than we.
So this tells me that these communities, including us, we got it from the state model bylaw that was likely available a number of years ago, which was the best of the best at the time and still is,
Right.
which I
Regarding that and the
That's great.
discussion with some other people, there's no question that in this document, because it's under density, density is a units per acre measure, that 8,000 square feet applies to a building lot for one housing
That's
unit.
not what it says, though.
But it's under density.
Right.
Density doesn't have, if a lot doesn't have any connection to the number of units, then why is it under density?
Well-
Density is a unit definition.
But you look at the first paragraph of that, right? And it talks about, septic systems essentially.
Residential uses shall have the following density limitations.
Right, but then it says non.
That's the
Well, hold on,
last
but-
page of the thing.
But before that, it says non-residential uses shall not exceed certain number of gallons of flow per day for the
Right.
septic system, right? It specifically says non-residential.
So, but residential, non-residential lots are different than residential.
No, I get it,
Residential
but-
have to do with a unit.
But
You
it
don't,
doesn't, though.
then.
But it doesn't. A residential use.
I don't, first of all,
Calm down.
No, I want to discuss this. Why, under groundwater protection, would you define a lot as a piece of land upon which you could put any number of units? That's the way you want to define it. Wait a minute, hold on. Because certainly if I put 500 units on an 8,000 square foot lot, 80,000 square foot lot, I'm going to have a totally different impact on water than if I put one unit. The whole purpose of this is that a lot and a unit are the same because
No, it's not, because it talks about impervious surfaces as
Why
well.
don't we send, Patrick, would you send this to Ms. Stein, who was in here, no relation, and have her, interpret about whether or not a lot in this part of the law, refers to a building lot for a unit, or whether it is simply a parcel of land upon which you can put any number of units.
Well, but you say that, right? And especially in our community, that can't happen due to aseptic.
Well, then the law would
and
come
be
down and say
impervious.
you rely on underlying law in which, because there's single-family lots in this community, a lot and a single-family unit are one and the same thing. But let's let a lawyer look at this.
We already have.
Let's let a new lawyer look at this, because otherwise, I would propose immediately.
You know how many lawyers looked at our current one?
Otherwise, I would propose immediately a bylaw change. Because the purpose of the Groundwater Protection Act is to protect groundwater.
Right.
And saying that parcels of land have to be 80,000 square feet, no matter what's on them, does nothing to protect the water. Absolutely nothing.
It does.
No, it doesn't.
So, I'm just.
No, it depends on what you do on the 80,000 square feet.
Oh, right, which you have to get into, which it talks about impervious surface. Ours is even more restrictive on impervious.
But it would certainly begin with how many units are you going to put on the lot? And then, are they going to have septic? Are they going to have, what kind of surface imperviousness is there going to be? But it starts with the number of building units.
Hold up. Just relax, first of all. You don't need to raise your voice. When we had the discussion regarding Canterbury a long time ago, and Peter Britton was involved and so forth, he was on this board, I believe, when they enacted the GPOD back in the 80s, I believe. He was saying one of the major things that they were doing, due to the 80,000 square, the reason they had the 80,000 square feet was because they had a private well and septic on the same lot. That's why they were trying to get distances of separation between those things.
Yeah, but you know what? It's the same bylaw in Falmouth, all right? And it's under state statute.
Right.
It's exactly the same. You take the personal discussion out of this. Let's ask the town council
again.
what the meaning of this
Okay,
is.
okay,
fine, that's
so,
fine.
so town council will look at it, but the wording is silent on density on on a lot. This wording says nothing.
But the definition of density,
No, no, no,
go,
no, no.
the
Bill,
definition
Bill,
of density is
Bill,
dwelling
Bill,
units
You
per
have
acre.
to think of this. This was a state model bylaw a long time ago.
First of all,
and
Bill,
it still is.
you don't need to yell.
Right.
Okay, I know you're passionate about this, which is good. But we have, several members of this board have almost 10 years of experience with this definition, and probably 3 to 4 lawyers have looked at this, including town council, and haven't argued that this is anything different than what it says. Now, we can have our current town council.
No,
look at it,
the
and-
question is, what does it say?
I know what it says.
The question is, what does it say?
No, it's what, the question is for you, what does it mean? Because you are, from what I'm gathering, are saying that this says, or should say, a lot should have no more than one dwelling on 80,000 square
On
feet.
80,000 square feet.
That's what your contention is.
Right.
That's fine.
Because that's the definition of density.
No, it's
It's
not.
dwelling,
No,
what
it's
what
not.
is it?
No,
What is it? It's dwelling units per
No.
unit of land.
No.
No.
What is
It can be a number of
Wait a minute,
things.
what is the
It
definition
doesn't
of
even have to be
density?
dwelling unit.
What?
It doesn't even have to be dwelling unit.
Density is residential dwelling units
Right.
per acre, per square mile. That's the definition. Google it.
No, that's fine. But again,
There's
you
no-
can't tell me, a lot of towns and cities in Massachusetts have a bylaw similar to this.
And I'm sure they all use it
If you go.
effectively to lower
Just
density.
wait a minute, I'm talking. Just stop
Okay.
interrupting and relax. You go to any of these towns, or numbers of these towns that have this, and I can guarantee you, there are developments in them that have well over one house or one dwelling unit per 80,000 square feet in that zone. Guaranteed. Because we do and others do. So,
Well, then it's kind of a sham to say that the purpose of this law is to limit extractions of groundwater if you can put any number of units, wait a minute, any
not
number of
about
units
limiting
on an
extractions of
80,000
groundwater.
square foot lot,
not about limiting extractions of groundwater. If you read what this is about,
preserving
the
aquifers.
biggest thing is chemicals, right? Chemicals, preserving the aquifers and so forth. It's also about limiting impervious surfaces, which, as we know from Canterbury.
Well, it does all those things in other sections, and in addition, in this section, it imposes a limit on density. Density is units per acre.
It's not defined in here.
It's not no.
Well, the common definition of density would be
All
units
right,
per
all
acre.
right. Okay, so we don't
The
need
law falls back on common definition if
We
you
got it,
haven't.
we got it.
we know where you're going. We got it. We'll have town council.
We've had this.
We haven't made a definition, I agree.
I've got it, and as we've said calmly, we've had this discussion ad nauseum before, and it's fine, we'll have this again, and we can certainly get town council's opinion. But just understand, Bill, this is your opinion, so we'll have to wait and see what
Absolutely,
legal counsel
absolutely.
says, and I'm sure even if legal counsel comes back and supports what we've been told in the past, you're still going to have your opinion, and it's not going to change. So,
No, but I would then propose a bylaw amendment. We wouldn't need to vote for it, but I would propose it.
That's
And
fine.
because I think that should be the purpose of this part of the
Well, I understand-
groundwater
I understand
protection.
what you're saying is you see nothing more than 1 unit per 80,000 square foot lot. That's you're pretty much drawing the line.
Or we could change it to 40 or 20, whatever
Right.
engineers
Well,
told
It's all
us.
coming from Dave. We know.
Whatever
It's all coming.
engineers told us was a reasonable restriction in order to preserve the groundwater.
Okay, so.
But I don't want, I want to get rid of this ambiguity, because I see it as a
That's
real
fine, that's fine.
ambiguity.
But I think just sort of to follow your train of thought, and you said let the engineers decide. We did do that at Canterbrook. We determined what was acceptable and could be built, given the Title V and the groundwater protection overlay district requirements in terms of impervious soil and Title V. All the engineers agreed that what was, and that we had multiple engineers from the opposition and neighbors that agreed what could be built in the GPOD. So we're not arguing against what you're saying. We are saying,
I don't even care if you don't have any limit on residential density. If it's all about chemicals and impervious soils and what seeps back into the groundwater, and that's fine, and we rely on the underlying zoning. That's fine too. I'm happy with that. I just think this is a total contradiction. I think it's a
what
hornet's
I'm
nest.
hearing you say is you're uncomfortable with the lack of clarity.
The lack of clarity. What is a
In
lot?
terms of potential density.
Well, but then you have to throw out every overlay district then, if you're going to that extreme, period, whether it's in the GPOD or not.
Well, overlay districts have, if you don't specify in an overlay district, you go back to the underlying zoning.
Right.
Well, it's
Right.
not a question of zoning. It has to do with the fact that there is an advanced wastewater treatment plant on those projects which we've approved, which was.
Well, no, it's not, no,
Yes,
it's not.
it is, because
No, it's not.
both
It's-
the Patton and the
It's not. It's
Canterbrook,
not a treatment plant.
but they do have a
It's a
treatment.
They have advanced treatment.
It's a septic system, but it's
I mean,
not. It's not a
here's
wastewater-
another thing. The
it's not a
basic
wastewater
zoning
treatment
ordinance that we have
Well-
has a definition of density, does it
We
not?
got-
There's a difference.
Way up
We
early,
got opinions.
it's residential
from the people that were
density is
reviewing.
dwelling units per acre, dwelling units per unit of land, I believe. And if this is an amendment to that density ordinance, then that definition of we could argue about this, but it would seem to me that definition of density would uphold in all of the subsequent documents.
Well, it's kind of like an academic argument, because any kind of development that's going to happen, that's going to be more than 1 unit, is going to be a special permit. So we would be going through a detailed and technical analysis of what's being proposed in terms of the number of units, as we did with Patton Ridge and as well with Canterbrook, is what actually can fit on that land, how much is going to be impervious, how much is being preserved and set aside, and what kind of septic system is going to be proposed to treat the effluent created by that development.
I agree.
And
How
does
much
it-
land did they set aside on Patton Ridge?
14 acre, was it?
Plus,
No, it was, the whole site, it was a 4-acre parcel for the houses.
Right.
Right, but then there was
And
20,
then for another
whatever left
14.
over.
Out of, 27 acres total minus the 4, so you got 23 remaining.
right, so they were setting aside enough land
Right.
to meet the 80,000 square foot
Oh,
definition.
no, they were
That's
doing,
just an
they were.
That's just a cluster. All it was is a cluster
No,
development.
you're trying to confuse this. That's not what happened, right? Again, that the lot that those houses were built on was 4 acres or whatever, 4.5
Yes,
acres.
it's 4.
Four.
Period. And Canterbrook was 11, right? 14, maybe, 14.
But Canterbrook didn't have a set-aside.
There's no set aside. There doesn't need to
There
be
was a set-aside at Patton Ridge.
No, there wasn't. There wasn't.
No,
They
that
dedic-
happened to be the way we got extra land there, but the sort of.
Why did you want extra land?
Not
No, it
because
had
of the
nothing to do with
septic
it.
system.
They wanted to, the town wanted to keep the homestead, right? A certain amount of acres. They set aside 4 acres, 4.5 acres for development.
Right.
It was as simple as that.
And we went out with an RFP, and that's how it happened.
So anyway, we're gonna have lots of discussion on this.
All right, let's get some opinion on it. I just see it as a contradiction, that's all.
All right. I also sent out the Beverly's solar equipment bylaws regarding small-scale ground-mounted. At some point, we should work through the language, see what people like, what you don't like. You know, should we have more, should we have less?
Anything to
Should-
do with the dump, though. That's
No,
not.
no.
Yeah,
No, this is-
exactly.
Yeah.
No, but they have a section of their ordinance which deals also with large-scale commercial. And my question would be, they build in what seems like a lot of protections. If the system winds down, what do they do with it? How do you dispose of it?
Yeah.
Do we have those in place for what's going on down at Chabaco?
Our lease has all of that in it,
That was my question.
which is even harder and
Okay.
more rigorous.
Okay.
I do think we need to work through this as we have more and more solar, and they're all relatively new. And so it's better to think about how they're going to end
Yeah.
their lives now.
And I recall about 2 or 3 years ago, Channel 5 interviewing some residents in Beverly
Oh, yeah.
who were living next door to, families that put, ground-mounted solar things with, some really brilliantly reflective things, directed in directions that they shouldn't have been. So I at that time, I recall that Beverly may not have had the, any of that control that we now see, so, it's probably a good time for us to pursue it.
In town here, the major thing is roof systems. They just
Yeah.
pop up like rabbits.
Yeah.
And you'll notice the last page of this
Yeah.
has roof-mounted solar energy systems too. Very short, sweet, succinct. And in most cases, roof-mounted equipment seems to be pretty darn innocuous, not
Yeah.
problematic, helpful to the property owners. I think a lot of them are or have been subsidized by various entities over time, so I think it's great that they're available to people. But one of the comments was made when we were talking about the next item. Well, are we trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist? And, relative to roof mounted, if we're not experiencing a problem, which I'm not aware that we are, and I do work with the building department every single day, they don't seem to be having problems with them, so there's that.
I mean, a lot of that solar was done during the cowboy era too, when it was first coming out. It's not, the incentives aren't anywhere near what they were.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've definitely wound down on those.
And people have learned that you don't lease your roof for $100 a year for fixed electricity costs. So we have too many non-consistent roofs in this town to have that kind of sudden pop-up of solar.
What's a non-consistent roof?
All these roofs with any kind of dormers.
Yeah, like long expanses of
Yeah,
it.
long- I
I know
mean,
what you mean.
you drive down, what's the Dodge? It's the one past Henry's. All those houses are exactly the same. They're
Right.
you know, capes or colonials, same size, same shape.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple of
So-
four squares on.
I mean, I don't mind entertaining the idea of this. I mean, the ground mounted, see them pop up every once in a while, but, yeah, I think we should have something that allows them by right, like this does, and then if you can't meet those requirements, then it's a special permit.
I mean, I haven't seen solar panels lately that reflect. I mean, their whole point is to absorb.
Yeah. Right.
So what are we doing with this?
So, I'm asking the board, number one, do you think we need it?
Right.
Number two, look at the text if you think we do need it, and tell us what you want or don't want, and if you don't want it, say so.
So, and the assumption is this is for the April town meeting?
Yes, it would be spring.
Okay.
So let's just,
Are there any ground-mounted solar energy systems in town now?
residential systems?
Pardon?
Residential systems?
Yeah, there is one off Essex Street. The Brislins have actually pretty good, maybe about half the size of this room.
How much land do they have?
Oh, they have a couple of acres. And
Okay,
it's hidden away from the house. I mean, it doesn't, you can't even see it from Essex Street. You wouldn't know it was there. But, I mean, it was, you know, it's a good-sized system. It powers their whole house.
and I know there's a couple of roof-based,
Oh, there's tons of roof-based.
huh?
There's tons of roof-based
I
ones.
haven't seen that many, but I know where there's at least two.
Next door.
Have a bunch of
Oh, yeah, right.
Roofs are all over, roofs
I
are
can
all
throw a
over the
rock to
place.
two
Roofs
of
are
them.
all over the place.
Okay, so.
So-
So do you,
So let's get a quick sense, right? Ground mounted solar systems, do we think we need something, a bylaw? Just a
If we
quick-
could do it
quick
short
poll.
and sweet, it would be really, it just
it's
head off a problem, but, you know,
non-controversial.
Yeah,
easy
Yeah.
to do.
yeah.
short and sweet.
Yeah, no, I thought this was pretty well done, really, overall.
I agree. I think it's better to have it than not have it.
Yeah.
Because it could save a lot of problems down the line. If somebody comes in and does something absurd.
Right. Because I'm assuming right now, if you want to put one up, it's a structure and it has to meet the
Setbacks.
of current setbacks.
Otherwise, that's kind of it.
Yeah. Okay.
What was your other question?
My other question? Do we want anything for roof mounted?
I think what this is in terms of
Yeah.
roof mounting's perfect. It just says you can't go too high, and
Yeah.
it defers to the historic commission in,
Well, yeah,
for those districts, and it's just, it clarifies.
yeah.
Well, the roof
I think,
line-
I think the 5 feet thing's a little high, actually, but that,
Yeah,
those things don't stick off
It's,
the roof
it's
very
5 feet above the peak of the roof.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty
Right.
high.
That's pretty high. Yeah.
Our roofs aren't
Wind-
designed structurally to handle something extending off the roof anyway.
Right.
And they
That's
gotta be
true,
able to
blow away,
withstand the
they blow away.
wind and so on, because they're up higher. So they're not gonna go too high, or you're gonna.
No,
have
but I
a-
was saying
Blow
5
away.
feet seems kind of excessive, but.
Wanna
Yeah,
make it
trying
for-
to imagine one that's 5 feet
Right.
above the highest
Yeah.
point of the roof.
3 feet?
I mean, typically a roof mounted is, you've got little stanchions.
6
and
inches.
it's,
It's about 6 inches.
And then it's all, 1.5 feet, 2 feet, but
Right.
5 seems like a lot. At least on a pitched roof.
2 feet?
2 feet.
I don't think we should choose it. What we ought to have is something about a wind resistance or.
That's in the
something
first,
that can't
that's
be
in the
torn
first.
up.
Says it's gonna meet all
It-
codes.
Yeah, they've got, there's certain building codes they have to meet, period, so. Okay.
Okay, so
Right.
does that answer your question?
Very
Well, I
good.
just wanted,
Yeah, it does.
is there anything else? So we're talking about GPOD and solar.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Well, you got the, short-term rentals in here.
I brought this up again to, in relative to the comment that I recited just a few minutes ago. If it's not a problem, why are we solving it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
at this point.
checked with the building department just to see, where are we at in terms of short-term rentals? Have there been issues in the last couple of years? You'll recall, we did have a spat of that about 3 years ago. We had some issues out at Tobacco Lake where a property had an Airbnb unit that was being marketed. People were coming, going, creating some havoc in the neighborhood. That has abated. That neighborhood hasn't seen fit to, complain since that time.
The
Thank goodness.
Homeowner was appropriately ostracized.
Not sure what happened, but, as I found out here, we do have some of the short-term rentals here in town that are being marketed, but we're not seeing issues, we're not getting calls, we're not getting requests for new regulatory controls.
I think
Let's
we'll
skip it
skip
then.
it for now.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess my only opinion would be is those are 10 units that are not going into the rental pool, the long-term rental pool, right? And if this becomes, I know Hawaii is different because it's vacation land, but people were doing short-term rentals in neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And it was causing real problems with the housing for low income because, they were getting $100 a night versus $1,500 for the month for, I think it's better to head it off sooner. Here again, something that we should think sooner than later, especially with Asbury Grove being so many small units and
Do we have a lodging tax?
We
No,
do not.
so that's not an issue.
I sent
I mean, some of these, I don't know if some of them are just rooms in someone's house or a room that you can rent, or if they're the whole house, but
Asbury Grove has some things that are just summer
Yeah,
cottages,
right,
so you can understand why those are rented.
Right.
Yeah.
And you recall, Mark Bobrowski, would often ask us, hey, listen, your bylaw allows for 3 lodgers
Right.
in every single residential building in town. Is that something you really want to keep? Do you want to live with that? And, we were stridently focused on not changing anything in the bylaw, so we gave that a good leaving alone,
And no one's complained.
and no one's
Yeah, well, it hasn't
complained.
been an issue, yeah.
I sent Patrick my brother's rants in San Diego about Airbnbs. He's been battling in his neighborhood.
What's the thing? We're not Hawaii. We're not even
Yeah,
Manchester
yeah,
by the
that's
sea,
right.
right? I mean, it's.
Yep.
So I don't.
Hawaii?
Unfortunately, no.
Dan.
Yeah, Dan wouldn't have to travel if,
yeah, exactly.
so, okay, well, it sounds like that
I would leave it
may be
alone.
something for the future, but
Yeah, we can keep it on the back burner and comes up again.
one thing has come up that I did want to mention to the board. There has been a long-standing allowance, I guess you would call it, in some communities to allow for what I call migrating buildings, where homes are built and then there's a connection built to an accessory building.
Call-
And that accessory building, it may be residential, it may be recreational, it may be, other kinds of things, but we've got an issue with one right now on Bay Road that is at a fever pitch, I can tell you.
The
What are they-
criticism is that
Pardon me?
too many cars parked, or what? What's,
It's too much massing on the
Yeah.
property,
Yeah.
so the abutter believes. And the abutter believes that it should also fit you know, in our, I think we've got a formula in our bylaw regarding accessory building heights. And
Claiming it's not an accessory because it's now connected?
yeah, because it's now connected and it's for recreational purposes, so that accessory building height formula is now no longer valid. So the owner says, but the abutter says, au contraire.
Well, I guess two ways to look at it was if they, you know, if they didn't have to go to the zoning board or anything like that to get any special approval or, you know, to connect it, if it meets the normal setbacks of a main structure and the height, you know, what's the harm, right?
Yeah, that was the building inspector's opinion, who
Just because it-
accepted the permits.
Just because it was one way and it wasn't connected, doesn't mean that it can't be connected, right? It's like,
Yeah, I mean, really, it's like, let's say I wanted to put an addition on my home,
What's the difference?
what's the difference?
right. Well, and like you just said, like, there's a lot of old farmhouses in New England, right? Big
Yeah.
house, little house,
That's
back
just
house,
the way
barn,
it's
like it all
done, you
just,
just
you know.
keep adding on.
Right, right,
Yeah.
until you get out to the barn, you know?
Yeah,
it's-
that's right,
Yeah,
And then they add on to that.
yeah.
They add into that.
that's right.
There's several that are.
Because
I mean,
of-
my only thing would be if they, let's say that accessory building didn't meet the setback of the main structure, and then they connected it, right? That would at least that'd be a zoning board issue, I think, anyway, but then I could kind of understand it.
Yeah,
We have a massing formula for each lot in each jurisdiction.
No.
No, we've got height restrictions.
Height
Or-
height restrictions and setbacks.
So I guess the question is if somebody adds in a breezeway from their house to their barn, and the barn's at, I don't know what the height restriction is, say 35, and the height restriction's 30, the concern with the neighbor is that now you've made this barn part of the main dwelling and it exceeds the height restriction.
Well, right, you're right, that's different. I think anything that goes against the zoning, right, when you physically attach an accessory structure to the main structure, if that accessory structure doesn't meet the zoning of the main, then it's a zoning board issue. It's a special permit.
But that
There's one-
breezeway
there's-
was always there, I just made it weatherproof.
Right, I know, that's the problem, is
Well, that's the thing, it's all these
upgrading.
little incremental steps.
Right.
It was a barn, but I turned it into a living room.
There's an additional item I would like to bring up. People that I don't always agree with lament the fact that town has no industrial tax base, right?
No commercial.
And as a matter of fact, if you look at our zoning ordinance, industry isn't even mentioned as a use. You'd have to use that residual clause up at the heading in order to see. It's never defined. You know, agro-processing, heavy, light, whatever you want. We completely punt on the issue until you get to the groundwater protection district, where there's one line that says not groundwater protection, commercial overlay district, where there's one line that says light manufacturing. And this would be a lot easier to get involved if we had some land that was appropriate. But I think we really should consider making some small changes to identify what we mean by industrial, to say explicitly it's not allowed in whatever residential areas we don't want to allow it in, and that it is allowed in the commercial overlay district. And, you know, we should also look, as part of an industrial development strategy, at whether there's any other little nook and cranny of town upon which somebody might locate industry.
connected to that, and this is a bit of a brain teaser for you. I asked the board a few years ago, should we be considering expanding the downtown business district? And if so, where would you think that would most appropriately go? That's your homework between now and the next.
Yeah,
I remember
anywhere you
this.
expand it, you bump into Nice
Well-
little old neighborhoods.
Well, but, so we had this discussion,
You
I
live in it,
I remember this. Oh, yeah, no, I live in it, but we had this discussion, and we talked about, I think maybe you brought it up, back in the day, like, there were pockets of commercial developments in this town,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
and now it's all just in
Well,
section
even-
one area downtown, right? Yeah. I don't remember where they all were, but there were a few of them, I think.
Mill
Just
Street.
walked through the village today and went down a street, and it was like, there was an old garage there. Somebody had a commercial garage that was a cement block, so
Well, I mean,
clearly
does-
there was something there.
Not even downtown, but I'm talking about like,
Yeah.
you know, there was something up on Essex Street at some point. There was even that little commercial building on,
There's 1A.
Bay
that
Road,
little guy's
right?
Bay Road.
yeah. So I mean, there were a couple
Where
pockets.
George Tarr lives, that building that's right there on the corner of Woodbury and Essex, that looks like a dive, used to be a gas station.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's George Tarr's property.
So I think you have to think a little bit out of the box that way, and not necessarily.
No, but even,
confine it to-
even if we can't come up with any area in the meantime, just to get all the definitions clean and make it look like we're trying, if something, you know, emerges, would probably be good.
Are you volunteering to do that?
Yeah, I think it's just a little bit of language.
Okay.
Well, the other one was where the bank is and where Harrigan's. I mean, that was probably a little bit more commercial than what it is now. It's those two buildings.
You
And
know,
industrial
Well,
base means some,
That's
you
different.
know, we need to find, if we really want to do it, we need to find 20, 30 acres, 10 acres.
Well, you want to do like a biolabs, right? I mean,
You say all the residual land left down by the solar, by the Rod and Gun Club is too what?
from what I can tell, in my time spent there, and all of the mapping that I've gotten from GIS, from the state, from natural heritage, etc., there's just nothing there. I think that, you know, that COD overlay it's a mirage. We don't have the ability to build there.
It's too bad, because it does have this
Well, it
gravel
was-
road access to
Yeah.
128.
Yeah.
yeah, it was just to do something with the dump. That's why it was
Yeah.
created. That's why the overlay was created. That's all.
And how big is the dump is being used for the solar?
Oh, absolutely.
All of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
On that bylaws.
I'm good.
Make a motion, we adjourn?
Oh, can't yet.
Minutes.
Nice try.
We have minutes. We have minutes to approve.
I moved the minutes of August 6th.
You want to do open meeting law?
In a sec, well, just moved approving the minutes of the 6th. Is there a second?
Second. Oh, I can't. I wasn't here. Never mind.
You can second it.
Yeah, you can
No, I can
second.
second. I'll second.
Is there any changes, issues? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes of August 6th?
Sean?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay, approved. Richard, you got one quick, hopefully, thing.
Okay. I was asked to do some talking points on open meeting law. Basically, the stuff that applies to us as a committee and individual members, and I didn't go into things like executive session, some of the other major that are primarily things that the chair and Patrick would do. There's a bunch of, first thing is, why do you have open meeting law? And the reason is, this is taken from the 2018 Mass Attorney General's Open Meeting Law Guide, which some of you will have and some of you don't. It's to give, you have it because you need openness and transparency to give access to and understanding of government policy decisions, how they're made, what information went into them. Underneath that, it's to prevent any shenanigans of people doing things sub rosa. That's why you have open meeting law. Transparency, it also gives transparency in deliberations, that people know everything that went into a deliberation. They have to be made public and done in public. And that brings us to what is a public body, and that is on page 5 of the guide. It's any board, commission, committee, and the executive or legislative branches of the town government which are established to serve a public purpose. That's us. It includes anybody that any body, any formation or group that also advises or recommends to the public body. So if we have a subcommittee or we have some other kind of committee that we have advising us, that is also comes under open meeting law. And then all meetings of those bodies or whatever are in public except for executive sessions. And a meeting is a deliberation by a public body with respect to any matter within the body's jurisdiction. So for us, a deliberation would be anything in the zoning bylaws.
Or anything before this board.
Anything before this board.
Right.
Right. But on the other hand, people that are officials like the town manager and the police chief who are employees, Patrick does not come under open meeting law. Those people aren't members of the committee. So they're not covered by it. And at the same token, if the police chief says, I need a committee to help me decide who I'm going to promote to my assistant chief, that committee is not bound by the rules and regulations of open meeting law, because he is not under open meeting law. We can't do that, but he and the town manager and the police chief and so on can. Now, what is covered by open meeting law? It's any oral or written communication by any medium that we use, which means email, letters, and oral, telephone calls. They're all under open meeting law. Okay, and meeting agenda, reports, documents disseminated by a person. Now, this is things that are not covered by open meeting law. An agenda, it's just a statement of things you're going to look at. Reports, documents, anything disseminated by a person are not included as long as it has no opinion expressed by any member.
So if it's just something that you're sharing
That's fine.
with the group, an article, for example?
If it's, you can share an article that would have to do with
Whatever.
Bill is talking about, water resources and protecting it.
Right.
But you can't say, I like this because it says ABC instead of EFG.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, you can't do that. And if you really want to disseminate it and want to make sure you're not violating the law, easiest thing is to either send it to the chair or send it to Patrick and have them disseminate it.
Right. I think the overarching point of your whole thing is all communication, and we've said this for a while, needs to really go through Patrick. We shouldn't be emailing each other, anything, any opinions or anything like that in relation to anything that we deal with, whether it's before us or not.
Is there any limit on what the number of members of this committee that get together and therefore violate? If I want to sit down with Brian and have coffee
You can
and
do that.
hash out the difference between lot and dwelling unit, does the one-on-one conversation constitute a violation?
I
Okay,
think so.
that's the last thing that I come to, that
Okay.
the expression of an opinion on matters within the body's jurisdiction, we're the body, to a quorum of the
Right.
body is a deliberation,
Right.
even if no other public body member responds.
Right.
So
It's only
It's
a
a
quorum.
quorum.
It's a quorum, right.
So we got one,
So
two,
yes,
three,
you-
4, 5, 6.
Now-
Four of us
Right, 4 of us can't get together and talk about
Three
stuff.
of us can get together for coffee.
Right.
Yes,
Well,
correct.
that's splitting a hair. and you- you
I'm
gotta be
asking,
careful.
I'm not,
So, well,
Let me
why?
just
Well,
explain.
why?
Yeah. The reason is that, let's say, you and Peter and Dan get together and discuss something. Then, each of the 3 of you go discuss it with 1 or 2 or 3 other people. You've now made a quorum. You have now violated open meeting law, so you can't build on spreading it.
can't have a network.
You can't have a network. You know, and I would be careful with discussing anything on, that's in our jurisdiction with any other member, sub rosa, at any time. You're treading deep water, dangerous shoals if you do that,
Yeah, I mean,
because you don't know when you're gonna get
well,
caught.
it's not about agreeing. It's about following what the law is.
I understand.
So-
But if 2 people want to get together and say, should we have mother-in-law
Apartments.
apartment in a certain building, and we can
Well-
discuss it, if it
But
comes
again, that-
before the board or not before the board, that's okay.
That, again, that's fine, but
That's
as
right.
long as you're not then just
Right.
jumping
Well,
people
that's
and talking about it.
Not proposing that,
Okay,
that's,
that-
I
so
think
that's
we all
fine,
understand
that's
that.
fine, that's fine. Well, you think, but again, I guess any communication needs to go through Patrick that is gonna be disseminated to the whole board.
But you gotta be careful, because other members could start saying, what's going on here? What are these people doing? And why are they discussing it? And so, you know.
Well, that's-
you're-
yeah, that's
You
nothing
can
new.
split the hair, but it may come back and bite you in the butt.
Wait a minute, so you're trying to cut the rabbit, and the rabbit's gonna come back and bite you?
Whoa, that's correct. Thank you.
All right, but technically,
Monty
the
Python.
limit is a quorum.
That's technical.
Yeah.
So the law is probably written to say something like a quorum or
You can
more
have
of
subcommittees.
members cannot discuss things.
Right.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean you should push the law,
No, but
okay?
So again, yeah,
Anybody.
everything should go through Patrick, basically is the.
My email works.
Yep.
Works too.
Okay, there's a motion on the table.
What are you so anxious about?
It's 9 o'clock.
It's not even 9 o'clock yet.
All right, well, is there a
Seconded?
second to his motion from 10 minutes ago?
Second.
All
Did you make
those
the
in
motion?
favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, he did.
Opposed?
Before- and then-
Motion